My name is Joel Coleman. I'm on the Oracle Apex product development team, and thank you for joining us for today's office hours. Next month on March 19th, Karsten Zarsky from our team will conduct the next office hours session on the new form region in Apex 19. And even if you've upgraded to Apex 19 and are using the new form component, I assure you, you will learn something new from Dr. Zarsky. Today's topic is about Oracle Apex and progressive web applications. And if you have any questions about today's topic, that is Apex and PWAs, please feel free to ask a question in the chat. There's a Q&A. And about halfway through today's session, we'll stop for some Q&A to Vincent, and then we'll do this again at the end. So please do feel free to ask your questions in chat in advance. Last year when I was at Oracle headquarters in Redwood Shores, California, I ran into Maria Colgan. Some of you might know her. She's a highly respected master product manager for Oracle Database. And she mentioned to me that she had found members of the Apex community to be really smart. And I already knew that, so of course I wasn't surprised. A shining example of someone in the Apex community who is really smart is today's guest, Vincent Morneau from InSum Solutions. He's probably one of the most competent developers I've ever met in my career. So we're grateful that Vincent has kindly agreed to share some of his knowledge and experience with us today about Apex and progressive web apps. So thank you and welcome, Vincent.
Does that work?
Yeah, I can see you perfectly, Vincent.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Joel, for inviting me to your platform and setting this up. I'm actually going to start by hijacking the title a little bit. I know we went with Oracle Apex and progressive web apps, but today I want to talk about building a public-facing app for the masses with Apex as a progressive web app. I think that encapsulates better what we're trying to achieve here, because not only we will talk about what a progressive web app is, but most importantly, we will talk about why you should turn your app into a progressive web app. So throughout this session, I will connect PWA concepts to a real-world example, Faby. Faby is an Apex application that allows you to connect to millions of others who are changing their lives that take a stand against climate change. But just a little bit about me. My name is Vincent Morneau. I work for InSum. I've been an Apex developer for 10 years. I've done quite a bit of open source work. You can find my work on GitHub, for instance, Apex Nitro, Material Apex. And most lately, I've been the author of a new tool by InSum, Apex CL, which should see the light of day very soon. But today, I'm actually going to do something a little different. Besides my technical bio, I want to give some insights about me that will shed some light into why I'm doing what I'm doing today. At some point during my career as a developer, I thought my passion in life was tech, like many others. I was a strong gamer as a teenager, and gadgets were providing a great source of pleasure for me. And then I started making some money. I became a huge consumer of technological goods, and I would buy things that I would use once or twice and then throw them away after I got bored. And I really simply didn't care. And then some family circumstances happened in my life, and I ended up owning a piece of land and a very small cabin. And that was so far remote from the city, without access to the power grid, and also out of range from mobile network coverage. And I would drive up to this cabin very, very often, and this became a very important part of my life. And connecting to nature in this way made me realize how much the gadgets I used to love were in fact a distraction. So from that moment on, I became very sensitive to topics around climate change. If you can find a place like this, where you can turn off your phone for a couple of days, I assure you it does wonders for creative thinking in your tech life. So before I go into the topic of PWAs, I want to give out a few disclaimers. I don't work for Oracle. I don't speak on behalf of Oracle or the Apex team. And I've been accused in the past of not going into the low-code ideology. So this webinar promotes some practices that are antithetical to low-code. So you have been warned. Okay, a little bit more context here. So as you may know, some traditional Apex use cases here. And I've taken that from the official Apex website. So what do you use Apex for? What kind of apps do you use Apex for? Spreadsheet replacements, Oracle Forms modernizations, reporting, SAS and EBS extensions. And I know this is true because being in the business of consultancy, this is often the kind of projects we receive from clients. But, and you know, there are other types of application, but is that really all? To me, I've come to see Apex as a somewhat open framework that at the end of the day really just creates web application, period. And personally, I've always enjoyed to get out of the Apex comfort zone. So speaking of the Apex, of getting out of the Apex comfort zone, during the fall of 2018, Steven Feurenstein came up to me with an idea for an application to combat climate change that deeply connected with me. So I just said, okay, let's do it. But we will use Apex and we will push it to its limits. So the idea was that we would identify and find solutions to stop personal overconsumptions of stuff. And we started to build a library of eco-friendly actions that we can each take in our own lives. And we started connecting the causal effect of the stuff we buy, the stuff that is built to build the stuff, the stuff that is built to transport the stuff. And I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of it is necessary, but in the age of climate change, most of it is not. So as you can see here, we use traditional Apex methods to build that library of actions. We had a bunch of reports, a universal theme application, lots of modals to generate and manage our data. And that was very efficient for us to kick us off. And from there, the work was just getting started. We had two main challenges. The first one is the conceptual challenge of mapping environmental principles to an application, which is quite interesting because most apps are actually used to increase consumption. When you think about it, Amazon, Uber, Netflix, any shopping app you can think of. So we had to conceptualize the opposite consumption pattern. And then came the tech challenge. Make Apex look and feel as appealing as a native app, which is mostly what this webinar is all about. So, continuing the context, in the summer of 2019, we were already 6 months in the development of Faby. But then we had an idea. I've been working for InSum for the past 10 years. And again, in the business of consultancy, you don't always have projects going on occupying every single developers in the organization. So we thought, why not leverage people that are currently temporarily idle, not working on billable projects, and use those resources to help the Faby initiative. So Stephen and I sat down with Michelle and Francis from InSum, and we arrived to this conclusion, and InSum finally joined the initiative. A little while later, in the fall of 2019, the first version of the Faby app, not the universal theme content application that I've shown before. But the app was released. You can find it today at fab.earth. And this application, which is made entirely with Apex, currently allows you to browse through our library of 400 climate actions that you can take in your own life today. And we've categorized it in many different categories. If you want to do something to save water or save plastic, or what you can do for transportation, we've categorized all those actions and put it into an app that you can easily browse around. This application also allows you to indicate that you've taken action in your own life. And when you do this, you earn life points. We call them life points. Think of it as experience points in regular gaming platforms. All those points, they eventually accumulate through to your, what we call the climate journey. It's basically your profile, where you can showcase to the world what you have done. And then you can also receive reminders. We'll get into this later in this webinar. You can get email reminders and also push notifications reminders, which are a PWA features. And right now in 2020, we are now over 30 volunteers from all around the world working on this initiative. And this is the last part before I jump into the tech stuff, but it is a question that I receive very often. How do we manage a team of volunteers from all around the world working on limited time? So I want to talk a little bit about our process. So first of all, what we do is we get into conference calls and we start brainstorming our ideas, and we drop all the ideas we have into a document. So this is really simple. We drop all of it here and we start sorting the best ideas and we let the bad ideas behind. And eventually, when we have enough information and enough good ideas, we take those documents to a team dedicated to making user flows. So we start conceptualizing how those ideas would map into an application. When that is done, we eventually move that to our team of UX people, which are creating balsamic mockups. And we start getting the feel of how this would work into a mobile application. When that is done, we move that over to our UI team. And our UI team use Adobe XD to finally start making realistic mockups of what our application would look like. Up to this point, this is still just mockups. And from there, we take the mockups and we start splitting the work into a GitLab repository, and we start assigning the work to Apex developers. So this is where the Apex work begins. And while the development is going, I also want to mention two pipelines that we use to automate the testing of our application. So first of all, we use UTPL SQL to validate our unit tests in the database. And we also use Cypress. Cypress is a front-end testing tool that allows you to actually simulate a user going into the application and navigating and interacting with the application. So upon each commit that a developer does in our Git repository, we have those two pipelines that are firing up and that are telling us if the application still works. So from a volunteer effort initiative perspective, this is very efficient for us because sometimes we only have a couple hours a week to spend on this project, and that allows us to keep the head above water. When the testing works, the development is done. We eventually move to UAT, our second environment, and we start making manual tests of our work. And if that works, we go to prod, as simple as that. So all of what I'm about to show today is possible on the Oracle Cloud. And I want to mention that because we use an entirely Oracle stack to build the Faby application. First of all, we are hosted on the Oracle Cloud. We use the Oracle Database 19.3 Enterprise Edition. We have 3 different distinct environments: Dev, UAT, Prod. We use Nginx for reverse proxy, and we use Apache Tomcat to support boards. We also have a little Node.js server on the side to handle push notifications, which I will be explaining later in this webinar. Okay, so let's jump into the tech. So for the sake of putting everyone on the same level, I do want to give a small reminder of what a progressive web app is. So a progressive web app is actually a series of concepts that when you apply it to a web application, it makes a very engaging experience that resembles native applications. So there are 3 main concepts that needs to be applied to a progressive web app in order to achieve the progressive web app title. The first one is fast. Well, obviously you all know what that means, and Apex is all you need to build a fast application out of the box. But in the end, it all comes down to the code you write, and specifically the performance of your SQL queries. And also, it's worth noting that fast for mobile devices is a special kind of fast. People have become used to native fast applications, and they expect the same speed everywhere. Users don't care about your tech stack. Statistics about users leaving websites after waiting for 2 seconds is absolutely astonishing. So we will go over a few tips to design a fast PWA on top of Apex. Second concept is that PWAs are engaging. PWAs are responsive. They can be locally installed on your device. They open in full screen without showing the browser URL, like a traditional web application. And they are also able to send push notifications even when the user doesn't have the app open. It's literally your phone is in your pocket and you can receive push notifications. Those behaviors, they elevate user engagement by a great margin. And they are actually quite easy to implement using simple native browser APIs, which we're going to see. And the last characteristic of a progressive web app is reliability. Reliability in this context is the ability to control resources coming from the server to the client, intercepting those resources and caching them. When you cache those resources, you allow your application to be available offline. So you can basically cache images, front-end resources such as CSS, JavaScript, or entirely Apex pages with some exceptions. But today, I want to focus on the first 2 characteristics. I have written some blog posts on how to enable certain parts of your Apex applications in the past. And this could very well be a complete session alone. So today we're going to focus on fast and engaging. But most importantly, the reason why you should be thinking of turning your app into a PWA is if you think that your app is worthy of being on the home screen. So that's a quite simple concept to grasp. If you think your application belongs there, then PWA is the way to go. All right, so what do you need to build a progressive web app? First of all, you need something called a web app manifest. A web app manifest is a very simple JSON file that tells the browser some basic information about your web application, specifically how it should look when it's installed on your mobile device, you know, the icon, the name. So what we have here on this slide is our manifest file. It has a few properties in JSON, such as the name. Our name is Fabi. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, it maps on to my icon on the home screen being Fabi. So that's really all you have to do to allow your application to install on your mobile device. You have other more advanced properties, such as orientation, how you want your app to be displayed, either in portrait mode or landscape. You have some color that you can choose, which defines the little loading screen that happens when you click on your app and it's not fully loaded yet. And then a list of icons depending on the size of the icon, so on and so forth. The second thing you need to build a progressive web app is a service worker. A service worker is basically some JavaScript code that runs in the background of your application. It runs even if your phone is off in your pocket. And the service worker is able to catch incoming requests in between the server and the client. And the service worker is the one that is able to cache those resources to eventually serve cache resources and enable offline access to your application. Another great use case of a service worker is handling push notifications. Push notifications happen anytime. You could be getting a push notification right now when your phone is idle. So who is watching for those push notifications? That is the role of the service worker. So the service worker receives the push notification request and is able to display it and open the screen of your phone. Before I move on, so there are, in a service worker, what you basically do is listen for events. The first event you want to know about in a service worker is the install event. The install event happens when you decide as a user to install the application on your device. And what you probably want to do on the service worker when a user installs your application is you want to proceed to cache static resources, such as images, JavaScript, even entire Apex page that you know needs to be there on the device of the user. The second important event to listen to is the fetch event. And that is triggered every time a resource is being moved from the server to the client. So anytime you are requesting a resource, the fetch event is able to intercept that resource, and then it's up to you to do whatever you want there. Cache it, or in fact, there's a lot of cache strategies that we're going to see a little later in this webinar. And the other two events are, first of all, the push event here, which receives the request containing the push notification message. And then the last interesting event is notification click. What you actually want to do when the user clicks on the notification, taps on the notification, well, obviously you want to open the app back and you want to lead the user back to the application. So basically that's what you need, those two files. But those two files are actually external files. So those files, they need to be referenced in your Apex application so the PWA magic can kick in. And how you would do this is a very simple example. There are many ways to register your files in Apex, but one of the simple way would be to pick one of your page and use this navigator.serviceworker API. And then what you want to do here is register your service worker. So sw.js is my service worker file. The only caveat is that service worker is that PWA files, they have a special location. They need to be in a special location for them to work in an application. So let's take a very simple example of an application URL homepage, such as myapp.com/orgs/f?p=200. If I want my manifest file and service worker file to work, I need them to be at the root level of my domain. So for the web app manifest, that would be myapp.com/manifest.json. And same thing for the service worker, myapp.com/service worker. So for this to work, you basically need access to the backend server files. In the context of the Faby application, we've set up Nginx to manage our backend files. So it is easily accessed by going to this ect/nginx/htdocs folder in our server. And whatever I drop in here will be accessible at the root level of my domain. But let's be honest, this could be complicated. It's easily forgettable. What needs to be in the web manifest and service worker? So I want to talk about a really great resource called PWA Builder, which is able to do those steps for you and much more. So to do this, I'm actually going to leave the presentation right now and show you what PWA Builder is all about. So for the sake of demo, what I'm going to do is enter the URL of Faby. But I'm going to give it a separate application ID because I don't want to mess with our existing files. So let's say this is your application URL. What PWA Builder allows you to do is quickly turn your website into a PWA. So you just type in your URL and you hit start. So the first thing PWA Builder is trying to do is analyze your site to see if you already have a web app manifest or a service worker. Since I entered an invalid application ID for my Apex URL, of course, I'm not going to have a manifest or a service worker, but it is still detecting that I have good security, HTTPS, SSL, and so forth. That's basic Apex stuff. Now, what this site allows me to do is generate the manifest and generate the service worker for me. So I can do this by going to View Generated Manifest. And now what I just need to do is basically fill in the information for this form. What is the name of my application? Faby. I'm not going to have a short name. Description is solve climate change. Here's my start URL. I'll add an image here. This is my application icon. And I'll tweak a few more settings. I want my app to display in full screen. Orientation is portrait. Language is English. Okay. Now I'm done. I'll also create a service worker. What's most useful about PWA Builder is that it allows me to pick from a list of predefined service worker strategies. You know how you can cache your application by default. So I can pick from one of those strategies. For example, when you land on your application and you are offline, serve an offline copy of your pages. Or use network first and then back up on the cache. So there are many strategies you can use. And then PWA Builder gives you the code that you need to use in your application. So I'm not going to copy that for now. What I'll do now is I picked this strategy right here, cache first network. And I will go ahead and build my PWA. And this is the beauty of PWA Builder, is that now you can simply download the PWA files. It will download the web app manifest and service worker for you, and you just have to drop them in your backend server and register them in Apex, and it should basically work. But not only you can download the files, but you can also download predefined binaries such as APKs for Android, APKs for Samsung, and that allows you to put your application in those stores. You can put your Apex application on the Google Play Store. You can put it in the Samsung Store, in the Windows Store, and in the macOS Store. The only one that is missing here is the iOS App Store. And if I could be perfectly honest with Apple here, I think they're making a big mistake by not allowing PWAs to be in the App Store right now. I think this could change in the near future as more other platforms are allowing PWAs to be supported. It just does not make sense for Apple not to do it. So back to my presentation.
Hey, Vincent, sorry, I hate to interrupt, but can I run a couple questions by you? Do you mind, please?
Yes.
Okay. Here's one from Ilmars. He said, are PWA files platform specific, Android versus iOS, or would there be two sets of files? Can you please elaborate on how this works on different mobile platforms?
The files are not device specific. The manifest is a JSON file, so that's a regular web file. And the service worker is JavaScript. So they're all compatible with any kind of device. It's a web technology. It's not device technology.
Okay. Thanks for that. Another one is from Samuel. Is it possible for Apex to ship with a default manifest and service worker JavaScript?
That I will have to ask you, Joel. Not right now. Apex does not provide ways to generate service worker and manifest, but what I would do right now is use PWA Builder to do that for you and then move it to Apex.
Okay, great. One question more, maybe you already answered this. Harry asked, can you build an offline app that would work on both a smartphone and a Windows 10 computer?
It's a complicated question because there's no straightforward answer. Not all mobile devices support all the features of PWA right now. What I often say is, if you need to support iOS, don't do it. It is too complex at the moment to make it work on iOS. Android is very strong at supporting all the offline features of web applications. And for any desktop device, whether it's Mac OS or Windows, that is working very well as well.
Okay. And last question, and I'll save the others till the end. What if your this is from Harry. What if your application's on a protected network that requires VPN? Will PWA Builder be able to detect that? Do you have to do something special with the app so that you don't get a URL not found message?
Well, not really. You don't have to do anything, because the going back to the homepage of PWA Builder, you can put any invalid URL here. Like this one is actually invalid. And as I go forward and generate my manifest and service worker, I pick the option. It's like shopping for your manifest and service worker. If the URL is invalid, it doesn't really matter. Once you move it to your server, it will work.
Yeah, I think really though his question is about if I'm running a PWA, can it be equally used on a VPN and not on a VPN? And I think, as I understand the question, it really has nothing to do with PWAs, but your use of proxies in general.
That is entirely correct. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Vincent. I'll save some of the other questions till the end.
Thank you. So, because of this technology, we were able, for instance, to drop Faby as an Apex native application on the Android Google Play Store, which is great because people still have the reflex of opening the Play Store or opening the App Store to search for your app, which kind of drives me crazy when you think about it, because anyway, I'm not going to enter this, but it is beautiful that we can have Apex applications in most of the stores. Okay, so I talked about the characteristics of a PWA. I want to jump into the first one, which was being engaging. And I'll give a few tips for improving the engagement of a PWA in the context of an Apex application. So the first topic here is being always logged in. We can see it as a single sign-on of some sort. And this is really important for PWAs because most mobile users don't expect to ever re-log in, ever. Once they have logged in on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or whatever platform you use on your mobile, it would be very annoying to always have to re-log in each day. So there are many ways to do this in Apex, actually. But one of the ways we found, and I have to give a lot of credit to Tobias Arnold from Germany, who created this module, which basically goes like this. As you authenticate to your Apex application using regular authentication scheme methods, what we do is we get the fingerprint for the current device. Remember, you're already logged in, and then we encrypt that fingerprint. And we save that encrypted fingerprint in a user table that we keep in our database. By the way, the fingerprint is basically public information coming from the browser regarding your mobile device model and public stuff. And then we also store that encrypted fingerprint as a cookie that we call the super cookie. So then later on, the day later, when the user returns to the application, we take the fingerprint again, we encrypt that fingerprint again, and we compare that fingerprint with the one in the user table. And if it matches, that means the user has previously authenticated and is good to go. So with this always logged in technology, as you go on and open your PWA, you don't have to log in again. Another great engaging feature that we do is push notifications. And again, on this one, I have to give all the credit to Ryan Lee from InSum, who's developed this complex, sophisticated push notification system. And I believe, Ryan, if you're here, that I saw a blog post coming soon. So to me, when I see push notifications coming from a web app, I see a lot of potential. We are used to send emails in Apex. You use Apex Mail, you send emails, but you don't often send push notification, and it's extremely useful. You can send customized push notifications to any user. It can be a single user of your app, a group of users, or literally all users. That's customizable. And the content of the push notification is also customizable. You can change the text, the icon, so it looks like it's a native push notification. And those notifications can actually be triggered via PL/SQL. So in the context of an Apex application, that makes a lot of sense because DML processes are going on, data is inserted, and you can send push notification when something happens in your database through the use of Apex Web Services.make_REST request to our little push notification server. And as you tap on the notification, you also get back in your application automatically, and it works beautifully with our always logged in technology. Another engaging feature of Faby is that we decided not to go with universal theme for reasons that so Faby is meant to be looking like a native web application on mobile, and we wanted to have native components we needed components that were working much better on mobile. So we looked at available frameworks. We did not want to build everything from scratch, and we ended up finding this framework called Material Components. And creating a theme in Apex, when you actually integrate the content from an existing framework, is not that complicated. What you see right here is a portfolio of available components from Material Design. And what you can do is click on one of those components, browse around for the type of component you want, like this card layout on the left, which I find quite beautiful. And if I wanted to have that in our application, what I would do is grab the snippet that Material Components is providing, copy that snippet, paste it in an Apex template, and that's really all there is. It's a job of copy and paste. And, maybe changing the text, maybe changing some of the layout, but basically, you take what is there and you move it over to Apex. And in the end, they're good-looking, mobile-friendly, easy to copy and paste, as long as you include the library in your app. Another engaging feature that I think could be of interest to a lot of people is off-canvas scrolling. So what you see right here is the homepage of our application with a lot of content, and we were having trouble conceptualizing how to put that much content on a mobile screen. And a lot of you may be familiar with Netflix UI, which allows you to browse through movies or TV shows by not only vertically scrolling, but also horizontally scrolling. So in this case, what we have is an Apex Classic report. And that classic report has a bunch of cards. Those cards are copy and pasted from the material component website. And what we added to have the nice scrolling behavior is just those 3 lines of CSS. You turn your component into a flexbox component, and you indicate that it should not wrap under each other. And with those 3 simple lines, you can have that nice CSS behavior. And the last part is basically just to define the width of your cards. The next engaging part does not apply to everyone. It's a problem. I call it the mobile and modal conundrum. It's a problem that is specifically designed for devices with integrated back buttons, like desktop browsers or Android phones. Because on Android phones, let's say on these 2 examples, you press on a button and it opens up a modal. On Android phones, you actually have a dedicated back button that you can go back to the previous page. But you all know what that would do if you press back. You open a modal, but it would go back to the page before the parent. So you will be taken back to the page that was loaded before the parent. That is not good. It is not expected behavior. So what you can do instead is play with the history API of browser. That is basically, whenever you open a modal, you want to push a new state to the history of your browser. And then when the browser detects that you've gone back, all you have to do is close the modal, and you would never go back 2 levels before. So when you design a mobile application that is meant to be a PWA, this kind of technology is very important, because otherwise users are going to be mad about the navigation patterns of your application. Okay, now a few tips for improving the efficiency of the PWA. And as I've said, Apex has all the tools to be fast out of the box. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of your code, your SQL query. And one of the area that is very useful in the context of PWA is to create a hybrid between multi-page application and single-page application. Just as a reminder, what multi-page application is, this is traditional Apex patterns. As you move from one page to another, the entire DOM or the entire page reloads, and you reload the next page. In a single page application, when you move from one page to another, only the small part that you want to see, only that small HTML is replaced. So that can be achieved in 2 ways. By using JavaScript templating, so you inject basically HTML using JavaScript onto your page, or you can make use of hide and show of Apex regions. Now, I'm not saying we should do this all the time, but for some specific cases where in the context of this page right here, where we have horizontal scrolling and vertical scrolling, and you want to move from one page to another, it becomes really interesting not to reload the entire page, but just to reload what you need. So right now, when we click on that card right here, instead of reloading the page, it just hides and shows another region. So you can easily go back and you don't lose your scroll behavior. Okay. In one of the early versions of the Faby homepage, we had many reports showing complex data. So we had a lot of content, and we can argue that the page was not well designed and we should not have 6 different reports. That is fine. But let's say we have to do this. So what do? If the queries are complex, what this is going to do is load 6 different reports on page load, and your page load time is going to be delayed, and it's going to have performance repercussions. In mobile, this is bad. So what we decided to do, again, this is not typical good practice, but it helped solve a specific use case, is we decided not to have classic reports. Instead, we used static regions. So this loads instantly. There's no data associated to those regions. So the page loads instantly. And then instead of having the queries in reports, we moved those queries to ORDS endpoints. And so let's table that for a second. Now our queries are reachable through REST endpoints in ORDS. Now what's interesting is, since the page has loaded very fast, because it's only static regions, what we can do now is wait for the page to be loaded instantly. And then we fetch the ORDS endpoints. So we fetch the data in JSON, what ORDS is providing. Then what we do is we receive the JSON data, we generate the HTML using our theme, and we apply the HTML to our regions. So it's a great use case of ORDS. Another tip to deal with performance in the context of applications that are very heavy with images. In Faby, we deal with tons of images. We can have 50 images loading on page load. That is going to affect performance a lot. So that is a challenge. And the way we decided to deal with this is by first offering an automatic image compression. You probably want to read more about this, but there is an HTML5 API called File Reader that allows you to manipulate images size on the client side. So that is basically you being able to grab a PNG file that is over 5 megabytes and turn it into a small JPEG of a few kilobytes. So when you save a smaller image and serve smaller images, that helps a lot. We also serve all images in our application using ORDS endpoints. So that is used for optimal performance and security. That is actually very easy to do in ORDS. You create a GET endpoint. The source type is of media resources, and the query that you use only has to return a MIME type and a blob. And when you call this URL, you will get the image served to you. And this would be simply by opening an image tag somewhere in your application and calling the endpoint from ORDS. A nice little tip here is that you can add an attribute called loading equals lazy, which means that the image will only be loaded if your scroll position on the page is located on the image. So anything that is below the viewport will not be loaded. As you scroll, then it will be loaded. So I'm going to move fast here because there's only 5 minutes left. There are some good plans in the future by Progressive Web Apps API to improve the experience by offering very nice install prompts. So that should be coming in the next few months. The numbers of progressive web apps that are installed on the webs are really surprising. Samsung has announced that over 20 million PWAs were installed on 80,000 domains this year. That is very impressive. So, little recap for building a public-facing Apex app. We knew we were going to have a few challenges. App discoverability, putting the app into App Store, always logged in technology, a custom mobile theme, mobile navigation expectations from users, a single app and multi-app hybrid, loading all Oracle content from ORD's REST sources when there's too much content to load at once, an image-heavy app. So make no mistake, this is not easy, but at the end, I think it's worth it. So the Apex question is, does Apex get in the way more than it helps? That's a legitimate question here. And my answer is, Faby would not have happened as a PWA without Apex. We have a vibrant community. A year ago, when we put out the call to action to help with the Faby project, we received over 100 volunteer requests. We currently have a core team of over 12 dedicated Apex developers from all around the world. None of them would have joined if it was not built on Apex. My goal here is to dismiss the idea that Apex is locked into a specific app type. Of course, it's better at some app type, but it's not locked into it. It can generate any sorts of web application. And at the end of the day, behind all the fancy stuff I've shown, Faby is just a regular Apex app with strong data layer, PL SQL packages, lots of page processes, dynamic actions, and branches. It just has pretty makeup on top of it. So just to conclude, Apex is an amazing low-code development platform, but please don't let the idea of low-code get in the way of your ambitions. Apex is also an open platform that lets you build any app. If you're interested in seeing what Faby has in store, in the next couple of months, we will be implementing a full social integration. So posts, comments, likes, and people are going to be able to share what they've done to fight climate change. We're going to implement AI mechanisms to start feeding information that is more relevant to you, not just all of the 400 actions that we've found out. And we will also propose specific missions for you to be more engaged in the fight against climate change. So on that bombshell, thank you, Joel, for hosting me. Thank you to the Faby team for all the work you've done. And thank you all for joining. I hope you found something useful.
Thanks, Vincent. This is great. If you don't mind, it's at 10:59. We just have a few questions, if you don't mind, please.
Of course.
Okay, this is from Andre. He says, having the fingerprint saved in the database, does this mean that always logged in means the app should have internet connection to connect to the database and reply with the answer, yes or no, the user is authenticated?
No, the answer is no. The answer is no, but the explanation is a little more complex. And I hope we are able to eventually do an entire blog post on our always logged in approach. It is unfortunately not something I can answer easily right now.
Okay, no worries. We have 3 questions from Sven, Chris, and Sven, and they're all curious about using a Firebase, right? So Chris asked, are you using a separate server to generate the push notifications, something outside of Oracle? And Sven said, so far, I've only seen examples using Firebase as an additional API, and using Firebase would be a major problem for applications that need to be compliance aware, you know, for example, for data that's not allowed to leave European soil. So one, do you always recommend Firebase? And if not, what would be an alternative?
Well, we do use Firebase. Although we don't store anything on Firebase, what Firebase is the vehicle to transport the push notification from the server to the client, but it is not actually storing the data. So I'm not sure again about compliance and so on, but currently Firebase is, I believe, the only way to serve push notifications through the web.
Okay. I've saved two last questions here for you. One, Matt asked in the beginning. This is kind of an interesting question. He says, we're considering building a new app for our field staff who currently need between 150 megabytes to 500 megabytes of persistent offline data. Will Apex PWA be a good choice, and what would be the best choice for storing the data locally without the risk of losing it?
You would not lose it if you use, so there are many caching methods, but in the end, what you are caching is stored in something called indexed DB. And the space that you have in the indexed DB is determined by the space you have on your mobile device. So that most of the time should not be a problem. You can store far over 500 megabytes of data. And just to conclude, most of the time what you want to do with offline data is synchronize that data back to the server once you get connectivity. So it is very rare that you would have to persist with offline data for more than a couple of days, right? So you often want to clean what you have locally and refresh with the server.
Okay, thanks, Vincent. And the last one, kind of an interesting question from Andre. Why choose PWA instead of native apps?
Well, that's an interesting question. To me, the appeal of PWA is that you can leverage web development skills. And the market is growing a lot. As you've seen, statistics shown by Samsung are showing that it's booming. And you're also not stuck with having Google or Windows or Apple having to approve your application in their store. Because as a web application developer, you are the moderator yourself. So there's good reasons to build web applications instead of native.
Okay, thanks, Vincent. This was an absolutely brilliant session. So thank you, Vincent. And really thank you to all the attendees for giving us an hour of your time. This session was recorded and should be available online in a day or two. Please do join us on March 19th for the next office hours with Karsten Zarski on the new form component in Apex. And thanks again, Vincent, for all your preparation and hard work here, and really sharing your experience and knowledge with us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah. Thanks again, everyone. And I wish all of you a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.